Evening. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited for this month's webinar. In celebrating Valentine's Day, we are going to be focusing on fiance visas as well as marriage-based, but we're really going to be focusing on how to document the love that you have with your partner so that immigration is able to approve your application quickly. Which is always really, really fun and something that we enjoy guiding our clients through. So just give us just 2 minutes and we'll get started on the webinar. And as you guys know, we try to host a webinar every month. Every month we do a different topic. Last month, I believe we had focused on humanitarian parole. For January, as it was the 1-year anniversary of the humanitarian parole that was passed by Biden. And this month, being Valentine's Day, we're focusing on our love cases, the fiance visas and the marriage-based petitions. And every month we'll do a different topic, at the request of our audience and what you guys would like us to focus on. So if there's something that you're dying for us to kind of, talk about in detail, just put it in the comments or shoot us a message or leave it in the comments if you see the video later on YouTube so that we can definitely cater to your needs.
Thank you so much for that very, very informative introduction, attorney. On that note, I believe that we should be getting started in the next couple of minutes. I just want everybody to go ahead and write down in the chat where you're where you're commenting from, and also what your current situation is. Are you in a situationship? Are you in the process of getting married? Tell me a little bit more about yourself so we can see if we can cater this to your needs today. Great. So just to give everyone a heads up, welcome Miami. Thank you so much for joining us, Donald. So just to give everyone a heads up, we are a law firm dedicated to immigration. We are based in Miami, Florida. However, we take cases from all over the country because immigration is what we do, okay? So if you're outside of the country or inside of the country, don't hesitate to write to us. Our email address is intro@elizeelawfirm.com. You can also give us a call at 305-371-8846. Welcome, Anna from New York. Awesome. So let's get this webinar going.
Perfect.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so everybody can see our presentation for today.
Okay, awesome. So we're focusing on love beyond borders, right? We are definitely an international world. We all travel, we have family all over. We meet people online. It's not just a matter of, okay, like I'm gonna meet someone that's physically in my city. It's very likely that you may fall in love with someone from back home. Back home may be a different country, or you meet someone online, or you meet someone while you're on vacation. So love definitely goes beyond borders, and we're focusing on how to document that love so that USCIS is able to approve your petition to have your spouse or your significant other join you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, attorney. And just to give everyone a heads up, our managing attorney here at the firm, Elizee Law Firm, is Patricia Elizee, the same person who's going to be giving you the presentation for today. Her bar admissions is from the state of Florida. However, as I said, we work immigration cases from all over the country, so you are in safe hands. If you are in New York or in Miami or in Haiti or in Brazil, wherever you may find yourself, feel free to contact us. We're more than happy to talk to you. Our firm is focused on treating our clients in English, Spanish, Haitian Creole, and French. So there is no limitation. If you do have a different language, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out.
Awesome. So before we get to the nitty gritty, I think we should focus, like the slide says, on the processes, right? It's completely two different ways of doing the cases. You can either do a fiance visa, which will obviously involve the consulate, or you're doing adjustment of status, which is when the immigrant is physically here. for the bulk of this presentation, we really want to focus on how to document your love. So we're not going to spend too much time going through the step-by-step of the different processes.
Okay, awesome. So here we go, attorney.
Okay, perfect. So here you have the breakdown of the K-1 visa and the marriage-based petitions, right? Very straightforward. A K-1 is where you have a U.S. citizen, because only a U.S. citizen is able to request a fiancé visa for their partner. If you are engaged with a green card holder, unfortunately, that green card holder is not able to file for a fiancé visa for you. So if you are engaged to a U.S. citizen, they'll file the I-129 with the evidence of the relationship, the evidence that you guys have seen each other at least in the last 2 years, as well as the documentation showing you have the intent of getting married within 90 days of their entry into the US. Once that's approved, then the case is sent to the National Visa Center, who sends it to the US Embassy and Consulate abroad, closest to where your fiance is. There's an in-person appointment interview. At that stage, they'll review the application. Then the immigrant is able to travel to the US with a fiancé visa on their passport, get legally married within 90 days of entry, and from there you file for adjustment of status, and the green card will arrive in the mail. So that's the big picture, kind of step-by-step of the fiancé visa process. Marriage-based petitions are a little different because you're legally married, right? So if you're legally married, you have two different choices depending on where the immigrant is. If the immigrant is abroad, then you have the choice of doing consular processing, going through the consulate. If the immigrant is physically here, then you're able to do adjustment of status if they qualify for adjustment of status. So number one, you have to show that you're legally married to either a U.S. citizen or a green card holder, that the marriage is a bona fide relationship, that the I-130 needs to be approved. Then the case will be sent to the National Visa Center to collect the financial affidavit, the other supporting documents. Once the file is ready and they have documentally qualified, they'll send the file to the U.S. Embassy or Consulate abroad. If you're doing adjustment of status, you qualify for the one-step process. Is very common, where we do the I-130 as well as the 45 together, so that the immigrant who's physically here and married to a U.S. citizen or green card holder is able to get their green card here, okay? And it's very common that the interview is waived. And once it's approved, the green card will also be sent in the mail. So those are the two big picture breakdown of how these processes look like.
Attorney, before we move a step forward, I would like for us to clarify, if the person has, regardless of their status, whether they're engaged or married, have decided to come into the US and continue their process here, are they able to do that? If they've transitioned into a different situation, such as parole or anything that allows them to travel to the country?
That's a really great question. So if you enter, for example, with parole and you already had an I-130 pending, you are able to continue with the case here. If you enter with parole or humanitarian parole or the Biden parole, and you have an I-130 that hasn't been filed for you, you're able to start it from scratch. So either way, if you enter the country legally, either through a humanitarian parole or a tourist visa, you are able to continue the process of getting your green card while you're physically here. And that's very common. So we have, for example, families where the spouse who's coming into the US already has a tourist visa, but because they work abroad, right, and they have to continue working and they're not ready yet to make that transition from leaving their businesses abroad, leaving their financial responsibilities, they're not ready to come to the US as of now. So we are able to start the I-130 process. The immigrant continues to travel back and forth. If at any point they decide, you know what, I'd like to stay, so they enter with their tourist intent. Let's say 2 or 3 months later, they decide, you know what, I would really prefer to stay here with my spouse. Then we are able to continue the process with them being physically here in the US.
Okay, that's really great information. Everybody keep that in mind for when your questions come. Now, let's move on to the actual purpose of our presentation. which is let's transition into some tips for your application, regardless of what it is.
Okay, great. So first tip, consider your situation. You know, obviously everyone is gonna have a different plan, a different immigration plan, depending on what's going on with themselves, maybe with school, maybe with work, right? Just because you qualify for adjustment of status doesn't mean that you're gonna make that choice. So you want to take into consideration the fact that if you enter as a tourist, for example, and you want to do adjustment of status, you're probably not going to get a work permit for a few months. So it's always best if you come in on a tourist visa with the intent to go back home, that you wait close to 90 days before you actually file your application. Once you file the application, then you have to wait to get the receipts, to get the fingerprint appointments, and to finally get your work permit and your social. That takes quite some time. Some people cannot afford to come to the US and not work for 6 to 9 months until they do have that work permit. So if you're in that situation, even though you may qualify for adjustment status, you may say, you know what, I'm going to stay back home. I'm going to work. I'm going to continue to travel back and forth up until I do have my green card. And I know when I come in, I'll be able to work and I have everything already laid out for me. What are your plans to get married? So that's also a great point. Are you already married? You know, are you planning on getting married abroad? Are you planning on getting married in the US? How long is it going to take for you to get the legal documentation to show that you're legally married? Each country is different, and each country has its different timeline to get you that certification from the government that show that you're legally married. So that's also one consideration to have. And where is your spouse or fiance? You know, is your spouse physically living with you abroad? So this is a really, really great point to make. If you're engaged to a US citizen and that US citizen is living with you abroad, you really have to determine, do you have enough evidence to show that that US citizen is only abroad temporarily? Why is that? Because as a US citizen, of course, you have the right to petition for your spouse to get the green card. However, if you're not currently residing in the US, right, or you're not able to show immigration that you're only temporarily abroad and that you'll be moving back with your spouse, then your request may be denied. So you want to have, you know, some of these things in the back of your mind while you go about deciding what is the best way for me to go about requesting my green card. Is it going to be a fiance visa? Is it going to be marriage based? Is it going to be adjustment of status physically in the US? Am I going to continue to travel back and forth into consular processing?
Attorney, before we move forward, I have our first question of the day. This person wants to know, their partner is currently residing in Dominican Republic. They are living there with their daughter. Can they apply for the K-1 visa from the Dominican Republic, even though the visa for Dominican Republic has expired?
So that's a great question. And it's a very tricky situation because when it comes to the consulates, typically what the law says is that as an immigrant, you have access to your home country, or you have access to the consulate where you have legal status. At the end of the day, it's going to be up to the discretion of the officer of where you are. So what I would strongly advise is try to make sure to renew that visa before the actual appointment date so that the person is not rejected. But at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the discretion of the officer at the consulate abroad. Okay.
Thank you so much for that, attorney. So let's move on.
Great. So it's super important to consider the timeframes involved in each process and consider how they align with your plans, goals as a couple, which I think we've touched on already. Consider the consequences of making changes to your plans during the waiting process. So we spoke about the possibility of starting as doing a consular processing and eventually later on changing to doing adjustment of status. And also, when was the last time you physically saw each other? This point is going to be very important for fiance visas because you have to be able to document that you've seen your fiance at least within the 2 years before filing. And we know that we have a lot of people following us in the Dominican Republic, in Haiti, in South America, and there are a lot of countries where it's not safe for Americans to travel to. The travel warnings are either on a level 4 or on a level 5. So if you haven't been able to physically see your fiance, then there's a really high likelihood that you're not going to qualify to do the fiance visa because you can't provide the evidence of you physically being with them. So, in that situation, what we try to do is to have a conversation with the couple where we make a plan. Okay, are they going to try to meet up in a third country? Are they going to take advantage of meeting up and try to get married? How are we going to process the case?
Understood. Attorney, is it absolutely necessary for me to have met my loved one before we apply for any of these processes? Let's say I meet somebody on a dating site and, things have progressed enough that I want to marry them.
So if we're doing a fiance visa, it is a requirement that you show evidence of you physically being with them and seeing them within the 2 years of filing. There are rare exceptions, which is a little beyond the scope of this presentation. But overall, you need to present the photos of you guys physically being together, the plane tickets, the hotel reservations, to prove that you have seen the person within 2 years before the date of filing the fiance visa. Obviously, if you're married, you've physically seen the person to get physically married. Well, correction, because there are states in the United States.
Digital world.
Right. There are a few states where you can do a proxy marriage. What does that mean? That means you can actually marry someone virtually online, depending on the laws of the state where the US citizen is, and they will give you a legal marriage certificate. However, in that circumstance, even if you haven't seen each other before you're married, for immigration to go ahead and accept that marriage certificate, you do have to provide the evidence that you've seen each other and that you guys have consummated the relationship. So it adds a little extra step to the case, which can be quite interesting.
That is interesting. I'd love to receive those cases in an intake. Guys, if you have a very specific or particular situation, don't be afraid to reach out to us. Our number is 305-371-8846. We're happy to listen to you and your love story.
So let's focus on tip number 2. Focus on the details when filling out the paperwork, right? So know what forms need to be filled out depending on what you're doing. We actually had an intake today where we had a Haitian national who came in on humanitarian parole who had an approved I-130. She went to the notary filed an I-824 for them, which was not necessary at all. That form is filed when you're trying to get USCIS to send the case to the National Visa Center to send it to Haiti. But she was told that she needed to file that form so that she had access to actually doing an adjustment of status. So before you send anything to USCIS, before you do anything, you want to make sure that at the minimum that you're filing the correct forms, right? And you're not spending extra money or wasting time. Gather the supporting documents required as per USCIS for each form. As you guys know, the actual USCIS forms can be found online. Each form also has instructions where you're able to download them and read exactly what kind of evidence that they are requesting of you. Anything you put in writing needs to have the supporting evidence to back it up. That is, basic, self-explanatory. And it's really important that you keep track of any changes made on the USCIS portal. USCIS.gov has a lot of information. Please don't be shy about going online to verify the process or verify the information that people are telling you, right? So everyone thinks that they're able to do immigration. Everyone is an expert in immigration. And they are telling you, file this, don't do that. You can actually go online and see for yourself the information that immigration has made available to everyone so that you're educated as to what's going on with your case. You know, one important change that may be happening, hopefully you guys know, is the change in filing fees. Immigration has made the announcement, they've been working on this for quite some time, right? That the filing fees will most likely increase on April 1st. So happy April Fool's Day to us, right? So the filing fees may be increasing significantly on April 1st of this year. The reason I say may is because in the event that there is any federal litigation, there is the possibility of a federal judge issuing an injunction, basically freezing it. But as of now, the filing fees are set to increase quite significantly starting on April 1st.
Okay, thank you so much for that, attorney. Moving on to the next portion.
So this is the fun part. This is the part where we get to think outside the box, where we really get to document the relationship and prove that you have a bona fide relationship. So bona fides of the relationships are really the evidence to show that it's a legitimate marriage. It's a legitimate relationship, that you didn't enter in this relationship only so that you can get a green card, right? So you really want to think about, how am I able to document the history of the relationship, the past? How am I able to document what's going on right now, the present, and also what plans we have for the future? So it's really important to note that on a legal basis, right, to have your case approved, immigration wants to see that you and your spouse entered into the relationship and had plans to have a life together and to build a life together. So, and a lot of people don't understand that or know that. So you have to think about, how can I show them that me and my spouse have plans for the future when the future hasn't happened yet? And how can I go about documenting my intent? Okay, so first off, no, there's no such thing as too much evidence. I get this a lot from my, how can I say this in a positive way, from my more conservative, slightly older male clients, mostly from the Caribbean, you know, the islands, as well as South America. Oh, attorney, I don't need to send immigration all of that. My marriage is real. If they can't see that, then I don't need to get the green card, right? So unfortunately, that's not how we go about with these cases. Our goal is to always provide enough documentation to USCIS where it's 110% clear that it's a bona fide relationship, and we're going for that rubber stamp approval, right? I just want the officer to see my evidence, flip through it, and say, oh, this is clearly an A case. They're clearly in love. You know, everything is clearly great. Approved, next. And to do that, you have to provide enough documentation to show that you're living with your spouse, or you have intent to live with your spouse in the future if you're not doing so yet, that you've commingled finances, that you have photos showing the progression of the relationship. The photos are really important because some clients think it's okay to send to immigration 50 selfies of them and their significant other. And I always tell them, listen, that's a red flag, right? Because if you don't have photos with family and friends, if you don't have photos during the holidays or traveling together, if all of your photos are only with you two, that is a red flag. So something to consider, for example, with the photos, is organizing them by date, making sure each photo has a description that says the date it was taken, who's in the photo, where you guys are. So for example, you know, January 1st of 2024, trip with my spouse to visit her family, celebrating the new year in New York. So that's really descriptive, and they can see the family together instead of just, you know, 20 photos of you guys at the mall together, or like eating brunch alone. That's like same evidence, but two completely different ways. Okay. There's also no such thing as oversharing. No topics are off limits. So this is a great point. And one thing that immigration kind of looks at is how long have you been married and whether you have children together, right? So sometimes I tell my clients, listen, it's not that I'm trying to really get into your business or like what's going on personally, but if I can get documentations to show that you and your spouse have visited a fertility doctor, or you guys have talked about getting pregnant, or that your husband has done a sperm test, or that you visited, if it's a same-sex couple, a sperm bank, or you guys are looking at to how to start a family together, that you guys have had appointments with adoption agencies. That can really go a long way with a USCIS officer, because they can see the intent of you guys starting a family together. They can see the intent of building a future together, even though you don't have documentation that you've been pregnant. And we've also presented, for example, hospital records showing that there's been a miscarriage at some point, things of that nature. So really, for immigration purposes, there's no such thing as oversharing. Another type of evidence that we try to submit to USCIS when we need to are communication histories. Well, attorney, are you going to read through all of my text messages? No. No, I'm not. However, it would be really helpful, for example, if you can export the conversation through WhatsApp, especially if it's a long distance relationship, showing how often you guys are communicating. Because as you know, if you're married to someone, or if you're in a relationship with someone, you're texting and calling at least 3, 4, 5 times a day. And if you're able to document that, then it goes a really long way with USCIS. If you have hundreds and hundreds of pages, then what we'll do is we'll print maybe every 10th page or every 20th page, so that immigration can see, okay, this is really documenting how their communication history and the fact that they're always in contact. Consider that relationships have more people involved than just the respective partners. This is also a great point, because you have maybe you met through someone. Maybe that person can give you a letter of recommendation, a support letter. You had witnesses at your wedding, right? So that person can write you a letter. Honestly, it's best friends and moms typically are who writes letters of support to show, so and so met their fiance on X date. I remember the first time she told me about them. She was so excited. I was able to really see the progression of the relationship. They did this, they did that, they did this. I'm so happy for her. They're a great couple. They have this in common, that in common, this in common. When you have a third party write a letter of support for you, it's extremely important that the letter doesn't say, "Dear immigration officer, I know this couple. I vouch for them. If you need any more information, please give me a call." That's not going to cut it, right? That's also a red flag. What's another red flag is when you send 5 letters and they're all formatted the same way, and they're all notarized by the same notary. That is also a red flag. If immigration issued a request for evidence, for example, right? Let's say that you filed an I-130 and they're letting you know, well, we don't really think you provided enough information. We want letters of support as one of the evidence. I highly recommend in that case where not only do you have each person give a detailed letter that is notarized with a copy of their ID and their contact information, but you also submit photos of the couple with that person. So if it's the best friend who's writing a letter of support, and you have the detailed letter, you have the ID, you have it notarized, and you have additional photos throughout the relationship showing that she's been around. That's also really, really helpful. And also think outside the box. So this is where we've really had a lot of success in our firm. A particular case comes to mind. It was an older, you'll remember this, Carolina. It was an older gentleman in Jamaica.
They do.
An older gentleman who was married to a young lady who was about 20 years younger than him, and immigration had actually denied his application of I-130, and he came to us, and we were able to do a motion to reopen and reconsider and provide additional evidence. And we really worked with the family to think outside the box on how he can document the fact that it was a real relationship. With them, we focused a lot on their communication history. They didn't have a lot of documents when it came to residing together, right? We had letters from family and friends. We also had evidence of him having a relationship with her children, which was also really helpful. We had letters from their pastor because they did counseling before they got married. We wrote affidavits for both of them explaining how they addressed the gap in the relationship. And not only did immigration reopen the case, so they took away the denial, and then they went ahead and approved it and allowed the case to be sent to Jamaica to be processed. So sometimes you may think that you don't have a lot of evidence to support your case, but if you take a step back, and really think it through, then you may be able to find evidence to prove to immigration that it is a bona fide relationship.
Agreed. Attorney, something that I've noticed our firm works a lot around is putting ourselves in the position of the immigration officer and really scoping out, what does the immigration officer want to see out of your relationship that's going to convince them that it isn't 100% legitimate. And sometimes, once you put yourself in that position, it's a lot easier to gather evidence of all sorts because it's not just photographs, as the attorney said. So definitely great advice to think outside the box there.
So I think this may be a good time to stop and do a mock interview.
That sounds like a great idea. So what we want to do is we want to present to you what it would look like to have the immigration officer ask you and what kind of questions they're going to ask you during your process. So you are the immigration officer, attorney. I am a simple bystander.
So this is a really great example of when you have an in-person appointment at a USCIS office, or even at the U.S. Embassy abroad on a fiance visa. So I don't want to spend too much time on that because, for example, it's, they'll ask, for example, okay, what is your wife's maiden name? Or what is the mom, what is her mom's name? Or what, they'll ask, for example, okay, if the wife has a child, what school is the child going to, and what is the address of the school, right? But for purposes of this presentation, let's focus on, for example, let's say you're a client and you're speaking to me for the first time.
Okay.
Right? And
all right,
you're thinking, well, I don't have a lot of evidence to show that I'm actually married and it's a good faith. Immigration requesting way too much for me. Let's do an example of a long distance relationship, and then we can do it again. Someone who recently entered the US and is looking to do parole. Okay.
Okay.
So let's start with fiance. Let's do like a fiance example.
All right, let's do that. So, attorney, good afternoon. I'm super worried because I've been in a relationship with my boyfriend for the past 3 years, and I'm really excited to have him brought over from Colombia, but I don't know what to do.
Great.
What should I do first?
So in the real world, I would have both the potential client as well as the fiance in the call, because as you know, as an immigration attorney, I represent both parties. So we try to make sure that they have access to the firm equally. We cannot have any conflict of interest. So whatever I say to one person, I have to say to the other, etc. So let's just pretend that the fiance is sitting there and is quiet, which most men are, but okay. So great. So you're saying that you've been in a relationship for 3 years now. Congratulations. First off, what is your fiance's name?
My fiance's name is Juan,
Wow.
and Juan
Okay.
Rodriguez.
And how did you meet him?
We actually met on Tinder. I just expanded my search a little bit. So it came out in Colombia, not only here in Miami.
Okay, great. So you guys met online, which is very typical for couples nowadays. And how did you guys start talking on the app?
We started talking on the app. Eventually we transitioned to WhatsApp. And this is how our relationship has developed.
Mhm. Let me ask you, when was the first time that you physically saw him?
Well, after about a year of talking online, I traveled to Colombia and we met in a cafe and we kind of spent the whole week together, just hanging out, sightseeing, the whole lot.
Great. Did you meet any of his friends or family members during that first trip?
Actually, at the airport, he picked me up along with one of his uncles. So I met him. I haven't met his parents, only through video call, but we're planning on doing that once things are moving along.
Got it. Okay, no problem. And how many times have you been to Colombia now since that first trip? So that first trip was about 2 years
So
ago.
I went 2 years ago and then I traveled back for Christmas, but I was only there for 1 week. I wasn't able to spend time with his family because we did travel elsewhere in the country, but the plan is for us to do that.
All right, so you guys traveled throughout Colombia. So you guys shared a hotel room?
Yes, we did.
Okay, great. All right. And do you have any family or friends that know about this relationship in the US?
Everybody knows about him because he hasn't been able to travel to the country. Nobody has met him in person, but pretty much everybody who I'm related to, who I'm friends with, knows that I'm in a relationship with Juan.
Okay, great. And what do you think the plan is for the future? Are you guys thinking about getting married anytime soon? What's your plan? What are you guys planning on doing?
So we're trying to take it step by step. We want to wait to see what happens with the fiance visa once it comes through. We know that this isn't a short process, so we're not in a hurry to get married, but we do want to get married eventually. We want to start a family together. He and I work in the same industry, so eventually we'd like to build a business around
Mhm.
that.
Okay, great. So, I would continue to ask additional questions, etc. But with the information that I have already, in this mock interview, I would say, okay, great. The first type of evidence that I'm able to ask for is the evidence of travel. So far from what I'm hearing, you've physically been to Colombia twice. So I want you to go back into your emails. I want you to go back into your receipts to get me the tickets to show that you actually went to Colombia. I want your travel history going and coming back. Okay. If you can also
Mhm.
give me the stamps of your passports, if you have them, then I'll also collect that from you. When you first went to Colombia, um, you met with him at a cafe, but you were also introduced to the uncle. So I would ask additional questions to see if the uncle is aware of what's going on in the relationship and has more details. You mentioned that your family members and friends in the US also know about the relationship. So I would try a little bit more and say, okay, let's do this. Let's have maybe the uncle in Colombia write a detailed letter, as well as maybe two people in the US, where they can give us in detail in their letter what they've seen and what they have heard, right? Because it's not enough to say, oh, I know generally. No, you want to actually put in the letter, they've seen how happy you are. They've seen how they've heard the comments that you made. You've said X, Y, and Z about them, that they've had the opportunity to meet him virtually. that they know he's excited to come in, etc. I would also ask for communication history. So you first said you met on Tinder. Do you still have the Tinder app? Do you still have, if you don't have it, does he have it? Do you have the communications, right? And this is really, so besides Tinder, there's also Facebook. It's very common for people to slide into your DMs, right? Either on Instagram or Facebook. And
The
you'll have
gram.
access to, right, to the gram. So we'll have access to those messages still. And we're able to take screenshots of them, download them. Then you mentioned WhatsApp. So I would ask, okay, do you still have access to those messages? If you don't, does he have it on his phone? Because on WhatsApp, there's a way to actually download the communications and send them to me as a PDF instead of having to take screenshots. You mentioned parents video call. It's always great to get a letter from the parents. You mentioned traveling around Colombia. So I would definitely want photos of that trip where you went all over Colombia on the, with the dates and the locations. And I would also want the receipts for the different hotels that you guys stayed at, or for whatever car that you rented or things of that nature. So that's like you know, a little insight as to how we would go about actually documenting this relationship for immigration. Okay. Now let's that was a fiance visa. Now let's focus on adjustment of status for someone who had an I-130 pending and came in and wants to continue with the case.
Great.
Okay. All right. So when did you last enter the US?
I entered the US in December of 2023.
Great. So you entered 2023. Did you enter on the Biden program?
I did enter on the Biden program.
Okay, perfect. So you entered on the Biden program. When you entered, did you already have the I-130 pending?
The I-130 was actually already approved.
Okay, perfect. Great. So now that you've entered in the Biden program, you have the I-130 approved. As you know, we're able to continue the process for you to get your green card while you're physically here. For us to be able to do that, it's funny because I'm already in like mode of, so for us to be able to do that, we need the supporting documentation to show that it's still a bona fide relationship. Having an I-130 approved by itself is not enough. The relationship continues. So when you're filing a 485 based on an approved I-130, you also want to submit additional documents to show that the relationship continues to be a real relationship, right? Great. So you came in December of 2023. Great. Are you currently residing with your spouse in the same address?
I am living with my spouse.
Okay. And the house where you reside, do you guys pay rent, or is it a home that he owns or a family member of his own?
We pay rent.
Okay, great. And did your spouse let the landlord know that you now reside with him?
I'm actually not really sure. That's definitely something we need to look over.
Okay, perfect. Now, you've come from the Biden, you've came in on the Biden program already. Do you already have your driver's license?
I don't. Should I get one?
Okay. Yes, okay. So we'll definitely talk about doing the driver's license. And since you've been physically with your spouse, have you received any packages? Have you received any mail? Have you ordered anything online?
I have. Amazon is my best friend.
Great. Okay, great. So you came in December, which means that at least were you able to spend Christmas in the US?
I was able to spend Christmas with him.
Okay, great. So we have Christmas, New Year's, there's Valentine's Day coming up soon. Perfect. Okay, great. Do you guys have children together?
We don't, but we want to have children.
Okay, that's great. Have you guys been trying to have kids, or this is something new? You're now starting to try to have.
So we were waiting for me to be able to come into the country to start trying. So this is something we're trying to start now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So from the information that I have, just on this brief interaction, obviously I would ask for the I-94 of you coming in on parole so that we have that, the receipt of the approved I-130, but also I would work with the clients to make sure that the lease was updated so that the spouse was either listed as being one of the residents of that address or it was added to the lease. So that's going to be important. Having driver's licenses with the same address on them is extremely important. So what happens is often the US citizen doesn't have their current driver's license on their current address on their driver's license because we move around and we get lazy and we don't go about updating that driver's license, right? But it really is very, very important to have your residential address, the same residential address on your license and your spouse's license, because that's something very easy for USCIS to verify. If you're physically living together, you should have the same driver's license. And also, as you know, USCIS does have the ability to check public records, including DMV records, including, you know, anything out there. So if you're using a different address than your spouse, then that can also raise a red flag. And an easy way to fix that is to make sure that both spouses have the same residential address on their license. If it's not possible to do so before we file, then I highly recommend that they do that in the event that USCIS later issues a request for evidence, so that I already have a driver's license that was updated months prior to the RFE, the request for evidence being issued, right? I asked, are you getting mail at that address? Because that's also a great way of showing that you're residing together. There's junk mail, right? Any junk mail you can take photos of or scan them. There's also the Amazon invoices. If your spouse is residing with you, there should be a few Amazon invoices or something showing that you're physically in the same home. I asked about Christmas and the holidays because it's important, like I had mentioned before, not only to have photos of you guys together, but also to have photos of you guys celebrating key moments in the year as a family. So you should have photos with family and friends on Noche Buena, and also for Christmas, New Year's, birthdays, Valentine's Day, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how I would start going about trying to document the fact that it was a bona fide relationship in those two circumstances.
That's awesome. I think this was a really great exercise, attorney. Just to kind of wrap things up regarding these questions, would you consider that having a good package from the beginning would weigh it? It's possible that my interview would be waived, so I don't actually have to go to the USCIS to show them that my relationship is real.
110%. 110%. So we recently had a case approved for someone in that specific situation within 3 months of filing. And not to say that's going to be the case for every single person. And that's for two reasons. Number one, immigration right now is processing these cases a lot faster than they were a year ago or 2 years ago. And also, they've made a policy change to allow an immigration officer to waive the in-person interview if they see everything is there. So we always try to submit a full package, not only with the bona fides, but also with the medical. We try to find the weaknesses in the case and address them with supporting documentation so that the case can be approved quickly. I think one of our biggest wins, well, closer to the end of last year, was the I-751, which is when you filed to remove the condition on a 2-year marriage. And that was approved, I think, within 2 months. And that is unheard of. But that case was extremely strong. Our packet was, our packets, it's just really rewarding when I'm able to send a packet and it's like a thick,
heavy
big packet, right? With everything there and organized and color coordinated so the officer can find what they're looking for very quickly. It makes a difference for sure from what we've seen.
Awesome. So let's move on to the next tip.
Okay, great. So preparing for your interview is key. This is 110% true. This is the case for both at the consulate as well as USCIS. So when you go to the consulate for an interview, those officers see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people every day. If you don't have all of the documents that they've listed in the instructions online, your case will be administratively put to the side and it's going to take months for them to approve it. For a fiance visa, you also have to provide a financial affidavit in person along with the supporting documentation. If you don't do that, it will delay your case quite significantly. So before the appointment, what we do is with our clients, we go online, we print out the instructions, we go line by line, we prepare a packet for them. So they are definitely ready. If an officer is asking for something, they're able to provide it. Because if you're not ready for that interview, you can miss your chance. And for USCIS, it's also the case where documents get lost. I've actually been to USCIS and they lost the entire packet. But thankfully, I physically had an extra copy with me, so I was able to just provide all of the documents, and he was able to process the case. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you have the originals for any copies that you've submitted to immigration. So being prepared not only for the documents, but also for the questions that they may ask about the relationship. I've heard horror stories of, someone going to a consulate abroad for a fiance visa, and they asked him, okay, tell us a little bit about when did you propose? What are your plans for the marriage? And he basically said, oh, I don't know. And by saying, oh, I don't know, right?
Here, all men. The
Right.
details are important.
So yes, it was definitely a man. And his fiance visa was denied, and he had to physically get married, and now they're waiting for the case to be processed. But you just want to be prepared for little questions that you should know. Like we cannot predict what the officer's going to ask, but if you're in a long distance relationship, come on, you should know when the relationship started, when it became serious, what are your plans to move forward, where you're gonna live, where does your fiance lives, do they have children, is this the second marriage, third marriage for them, etc. If you're physically living together, then you should know, what's the setup of the house, how many TVs are there, who lives in the home with you, right? What are the names of everyone in the home? Do you have dogs? Do you have pets? Where's the nearest supermarket, things of that nature, just basic information. And we try to do mock interviews with our clients before they go and meet with the immigration officer.
All right. So attorney,
go ahead.
Oh, there we go. Why is honesty always the correct answer? Because sometimes it just kind of feels like, one little detail won't matter to the immigration officer. What do you think about that?
Correct. So an immigration officer has the ability to deny your case, even if you qualify for it based off their discretion. So if an immigration officer believes that you're being, that you're lying about certain details of your case or the history of the relationship, then based off of just that gut feeling, they are able to deny your case. So you want to make sure that you're truthful, that they see that it's a genuine relationship, that you're being honest, and you do have the intent to move forward, get married, and build a life together.
I think that's really self-explanatory. We've seen so many cases come in to our firm because of one small detail that the immigration officer perceived as dishonesty, and it's completely altered the the way that their case was meant to go. So I think this is a really important aspect. And the last tip of the evening is going to be tip number 5. Shall I say it?
Right.
There we go. So, as somebody who works directly in the firm, you know, assisting our clients with getting their consultations put together directly with attorney Patricia, and I'm sure she's going to be very modest in saying this, but I'm going to go right out and say it. So many cases have the potential to be successful, but it's because of a lack of correct, correct addressing the right things in their packets, that their cases have been delayed, their cases have been denied, their cases have been sent to other areas of immigration just because of a lack of knowledge. And this is not knowledge that we necessarily think that you should have, because not everybody's an immigration attorney. But it's very important to hire somebody who does know what they're doing. Our clients are 100% set for success when they come for the firm. We work with honesty in letting you know what your current situation is, and we personalize each packet to fit your needs. Every case is different. Any notary service that you want to go to who thinks they can do the same is working off the same rules for everyone. Your immigration history is not the same as everybody else's.
That's a great point talking about notaries, because for a lot of our clients in their home countries, a notario or a notaire, right, is almost the same as being an attorney. And that's not the case in the United States. In the United States, an attorney is someone who's licensed by a bar. They're able to practice law. A notary is only able to notarize documents, signatures. They're not able to do what an attorney does. So as an immigrant, you know, you see notario and notaries, you think that it's really similar to your home country. Unfortunately, it's not the same. You think you're getting legal advice, you think you're speaking to an attorney when you're not. So you also want to be careful. One of the ways to make sure that you are speaking to an attorney is using Google or asking them, hey, like, where's your state license? Because every single state will have a website for the bar where you can verify whether the person is actually an attorney, and also if they're in good standing with the bar that's given them their law license. So that's a really great point.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being here. Attorney, thank you so much for all of your insight. We are super excited to be able to provide this for you, especially on time for Valentine's Day, because we do believe that love has no borders, and we are here to help with your immigration case. Our phone number is 305-371-8846. You can also email us at intro@elizeelawfirm.com. We are here to serve you and to better assist you and to set you up for success. That's what we want, ultimately, at the end of the day. We will be offering a complimentary consultation to the attendants for today's webinar. So you can definitely reach out to us using the email address, the phone number tomorrow. Let us know that you are here, and we will set you up with a consultation with the one and only attorney Patricia Elizee to guide you through your process.
Great. Thank you so much, Carmina. And thank you everyone for joining us. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. And we will see you at our next webinar, which will be next month.
All right. We'll see you there. Have a nice evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.